Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Prabhupada ki. Reading from First Canto, Chapter 12. Reading from verse 16 till 28. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om 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 Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Let's just go around and read the verses.
So, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 13, Text 16. Having translation, having won his kingdom and observed the birth of one grandson competent to continue the noble tradition of his family, Maharaj Yudhisthira resigned peacefully and enjoyed uncommon opulence in cooperation with his younger brothers, who were all expert administrators to the common people.
Insurmountable eternal time imperceptibly overcomes those who are too much attached to family affairs and are always engrossed in their thought.
Mahatma Vidura knew all this, and therefore he addressed Dhritarasta, saying, "My dear king, please get out of here immediately. Do not delay. Just see how fear has overtaken you."
This frightful situation cannot be remedied by any person in this material world. My lord, it is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the eternal time, Kala, that has approached us all.
Whoever is under the influence of Supreme Kala, eternal time, must surrender his most dear life, and what to speak of other things such as wealth, honor, children, land, and home.
Your father, brother, well-wishers, and sons are all dead and passed away. You yourself have expended the major portion of your life. Your body is now overtaken by invalidity, and you are living in the home of another.
You have been blind from your very birth, and recently you have become hard of hearing. Your memory is shortened, and your intelligence is disturbed. Your teeth are loose, your liver is defective, and you are coughing up mucus.
Alas, how powerful are the hopes of a living being to continue his life. Verily, you are living just like a household dog and are eating the remnants of food given by Lila.
There is no need to live a degraded life and subsist to the charity of those whom you tried to kill by arson and poison. You also insulted their married wife and usurped their kingdom and wealth.
Despite your unwillingness to die and your desire to live, even at the cost of honor and prestige, your miserly body will certainly dwindle and deteriorate like an old garment.
He is called undisturbed who goes to an unknown remote place and, freed from all obligations, quits his material body when it has become useless.
He is certainly a first-class man who awakens and understands, either by himself or from others, the falsity and misery of this material world, and thus leaves home and depends fully on the personality of Godhead residing within his heart.
Please, therefore, leave for the north immediately, without letting your relatives know, for soon that time will approach which will diminish the good qualities of man.
Chapter Sanskrit verse. Aho Mahayashi Jantor Jivitasha Yatha Bhavan Bhima Pavarjittam Pindam Adate Griha Palavat Aho Mahayashi Jantor Jivitasha Yatha Bhavan Bhima Pavarjittam Pindam Adate Griha Palavat Aho Mahayashi Jantor Jivitasha Yatha Bhavan Bhima Pavarjittam Pindam Adate Griha Palavat
Aho Mahayashi
Jantor Jivitasha Yatha Bhavan Bhima Pavarjittam Pindam Adate Griha Palavat Aho Mahayashi Jantor Jivitasha Yatha Bhavan Bhima Pavarjittam Pindam Adate Griha Palavat Aho Mahayashi Jantor Jivitasha Yatha Bhavan Let's read word-to-word translation together, please. Alas, Mahayashi, powerful, Janto of divinities, Jivita Asa, hope for life, Yatha, as much as, Bhavan, you are, Bhima, of Sena, brother of Yudhishthir, Arjitam, remnants, foodstuff, Adate, eaten by, Grihapalavat, like a household dog. Translation. Alas, how powerful are the hopes of a living being to continue his life. Verily, you are living just like a household dog and are eating remnants of food given by people. A sadhu should never flatter kings or rich men to live comfortably at their cost. A sadhu is to speak to the householders about the naked truth of life so that they may come to their senses about the precarious life in material existence. Dhritarashtra is a typical example of an attached old man in household life. He had become a pauper in the true sense, yet he wanted to live comfortably in the house of the Pandavas, of whom Bhima especially is mentioned because personally he killed two prominent sons of Dhritarashtra, namely Duryodhana and Dushasana.
Sons were very much dear to him for their notorious and nefarious activities, and Bhima is particularly pointed out because he killed his two pet sons. Why Dhritarashtra's living there at the house of the Pandavas? Because he wanted to continue his life comfortably, even at the risk of all humiliation. Vidura therefore was astonished how powerful is the urge to continue life. This sense of continuing life indicates that a living being is eternally a living entity and does not want to change his bodily habitation. The foolish man does not know that a particular term of bodily existence is awarded to him to undergo a term of imprisonment, and the human body is awarded after many, many births and deaths as a chance for self-realization to go back home, back to Godhead. But persons like Dhritarashtra try to make plans to live there in a comfortable position with profit and interest, for they do not see things as they are. Dhritarashtra is blind and continues to hope to live comfortably in the midst of all kinds of reverses of life. A sadhu like Vidura is meant to awaken such blind persons and thus help him go back to Godhead, where life is eternal. Once going there, no one wants to come back to this material world of miseries. We can just imagine how responsible a task entrusted to a sadhu like Mahadeva Vidura.
So, these are some really heavy verses that we just read. What I wanted to talk about in today's class was focus on two things primarily. One was kind of talk about how Vidura and Dhritarashtra had kind of a similar hand dealt, if you may, right? Like a similar thing happened to them, and how they both came out of it completely differently. And then second, like focus of Vidura as a Mahatma. He's actually one of the 12 Mahajans, the great souls. And, what are the qualities he's showing there, and kind of the compassion and the mercy of a Mahatma like Vidura. So if we talk about like the first thing to focus on, right? So in one way, Dhritarashtra and Vidura were dealt with a similar situation, right? Or dealt like a similar hand, if you may. Can anyone think of what that was? Like how they were probably in a similar situation? Okay. Kind of close. Yes.
They were both in household. They were both in situations where they had almost always the door was hindered by, and then Dhritarashtra was also in a position.
So that was, yeah, so the point you're saying is the Vidura getting offended by Duryodhana, but then he left and he was completely detached. And then Dhritarashtra right now living with people, who killed his sons, but that's not the thing that I'm talking about.
So, but because their body.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I was talking about. Exactly right. Yeah. So what happened was Dhritarashtra was born in royal right in the kingdom in the royal blood, and the idea would have been he would have been the king. Right? But unfortunately, he was born blind. Right, and there's past stories about all of this, which we won't go in detail for right now because of the time. But he was born blind. Right, so being blind, he couldn't be the king. So because of that one thing, it kind of stopped him to be a king. And in case of Vidura, he had half royal blood, if you may. Like his father was royal, but his mother was a maidservant. Okay, and so because of that, he was considered a lower caste, even though we see here and we learn, how learned Vidura was, but he couldn't be a king because of that, right? So they were dealt a similar hand in the situation that they both should have been the king, but there was one thing that prevented them to become a king. Okay, so because of which neither of them could actually be the king. And so we'll kind of focus on Dhritarashtra first, right? Like how not being able to be the king impacted him and his life and the decisions he made. And then we'll go and focus on Vidura and kind of how he used that in his life and how it impacted him, right? So let's talk about Dhritarashtra first, right? So since he was born blind, he couldn't be the king, right? He could never accept that, right? That was a challenge for Dhritarashtra, and that was his weakness, that he wanted to become that king. And so it was always like, well, if I'm blind, why can I not be the king? Like I can still rule. Why is it that a blind person cannot become the king? Why is system like this? Why is it, that I was born blind? Right? So a lot of times it was just like why, and being kind of that self-pity, right? And so he had that one desire that became really strong, and kind of, if you have a desire and you mold your life around fulfilling that desire, that becomes an obsession, right? So it kind of became an obsession for him that he wanted to be the king. And what happens is a lot of you probably in this room cannot relate to it, but a lot of times if you have certain desires that you're not able to fulfill, what happens is you become a parent and you're like, all right, like my son or my daughter will fulfill that desire, right? So you'll see like a lot of parents, like, if you'll hear stories like they wanted to be athletes, they couldn't be, the top athlete. So then, as soon as their kid is born, like they'll train their son or daughter to be the athlete. And, you'll hear like these stories of these amazing athletes who were trained really early. And a lot of times you'll hear, well, their parents wanted to be, a first-class athlete, but they couldn't do it, right? So that desire becomes such an obsession that they then try to live that desire through their children, right? So the same thing happened with Dhritarashtra, right? He couldn't be the king, but he was so obsessed with it that now he wanted Duryodhana to be the king, right? And so he's kind of molding him or teaching him in that way. And then, Pandavas come into picture, and rightfully so, Yudhishthir Maharaj should be the king. But again, Dhritarashtra is so attached, and he wants Duryodhana to be the king, that he and Duryodhana, a lot of times what you'll see like happens is, if someone is weak, right, they have certain weakness. In this case, Dhritarashtra had that weakness that he wanted to be the king,
and he couldn't really accept the circumstances, right? That he's blind, but there are still a lot of things that he did get that was really opulent, right? He was still in the kingdom. He had 100 sons. He had all the kingdom opulences, right? So rather than seeing all the positive things that Krishna had provided him, he was just focused on that one thing that was missing in his life and just was obsessing on that missing thing, right? So he was weak in that sense. And then comes Duryodhana, who's actually is wicked, and now he wants to be the king, but at any cost, right? At a cost to where he's in his probably not even teenage, where he tries to kill Bhima. He poisons Bhima because he's like, oh, they always had this rivalry because they were, since kids, they were learning how to play club, and like Bhima was a little bit better than him or whatever. They had this strong rivalry, so he like a boy poisoning his own cousin, like that's crazy, right? Like, and his dad, right, his father doesn't discipline him, right, because he's just so blinded by just two things. One, his obsession to be the king, and now like his son should be able to be the king, right? So like he's just blinded by all of that just one desire. So he doesn't discipline him. Then his son again tries to create this plot to kill the whole family by building this wax palace and burning the whole wax palace and doing that plot, so killing the whole family, to the point it comes to Krishna himself comes to as a messenger to, like, before the war, trying to resolve things, and Pandavas are saying, hey, our dharma, our duty is to be Kshatriyas and to rule. So we're just happy if you just give us 5 villages, right? Like in this whole big kingdom, give us 5 villages, and we're happy with just ruling this 5 villages. That's it. That's all what we want, right? I mean, and you can prevent this whole war. But what does Duryodhana respond back with? Well, I wouldn't even give enough land to where you could, put a pin, right? Not even that tiny land. I won't give anything to the Pandavas. And which is, they're right, and they're just willing to get these 5 villages, right? So, and Dhritarashtra, I'm mentioning all of this is to show, like, Dhritarashtra, he's not correcting any of this situation, right? His daughter-in-law is getting disrobed right in front of him, right? And he's not doing anything in that situation. It's just because he's blinded by that one desire, and it's getting so obsessed that it has overtaken his life, right? So one lesson that we can take from this is, right, like, if you have that desire and it gets into an obsession, that can literally ruin your whole life or rule your life around you, right? So it's not healthy, right? So that's kind of on the side of Dhritarashtra, right? That one thing he couldn't get, he just obsessed over it, and then ruined his whole life and the life around him of multiple people. On the other side, we have Vidura, who couldn't be the king because his mom was maid servant, so he didn't have the complete royal blood. So he could have also been sore or angry or resentful about that, right? Because if you see, Vidura had all the qualifications. If we look at someone in terms of the qualification, he was really intelligent, really learned, so much so that he serves as a minister in the kingdom, right? So what he ends up doing is, the big lesson here is self-acceptance. So we didn't really get to choose the household will be born in, right? We didn't really get to choose our siblings. We didn't really get to choose our parents, right? It was past karma, past desires that brought us into this life as we are, right? And so we can always see that, something missing, or that, glass half empty. But I think the point is that we can learn from here, from Vidura, is self-acceptance, right? What he did was he accepted that was the card that he was dealt, that was the life that he was provided. and so how he could use the gift and the abilities that he had best to be able to then serve in that capacity. Right? So early on, he realized, even as a child, like he had this intelligence. He was sharp. He had that, and so he continued to work on it and on his education and on that, having that wisdom and cultivating it to where he could be a minister to whoever was serving in the kingdom, right? So and he becomes to a level where he's advising to the king, to Dhritarashtra, and to Bhishma, who's actually at like an age of his father, right? So Bhishma is a lot older, and is a wonderful devotee. But a lot of times in Mahabharata, we'll see Bhishma will actually turn to Vidura for seeking guidance and wisdom, right? So he had that relationship with Vidura where Bhishma will reach out to Vidura to seek guidance. And Vidura is like, a generation younger to Bhishma, right? But he built that and used his ability to be able to be in that service, right? But the main thing was accepting, having that self-acceptance is what you're provided with, and then being able to do, the best in that situation, right? So the lesson for us is, again, there are things that we have, and then, there are things that are missing in all of our lives that, it would have been nice if we would have been provided that, right? It would have been great if the Dhritarashtra wouldn't have been blind for him, that he could be the king, right? And same thing for Vidura too. But accepting the things that we don't have, and then trying to utilize what we have, because again, we all have gifts that Krishna has given us, and kind of focusing on that. And then once we accept that and focus on that, we can shift our mindset from like that why, and being resentful, to how, right? And now, like, how the gifts that I have can be used in service and in self-realization, and how I can do my dharma with the gifts that are given to me, right? So that's one thing that I wanted to kind of focus on. The second thing is what's really important here, and what we've been talking about in the purport and all these verses, is Vidura playing the part of that Mahatma. So Vidura, what happened is, as you were saying, Prabhu, earlier, is before the war is happening again, Vidura is trying to tell Dhritarashtra, like, this is not the right thing. And, as a minister, that's his duty to provide the right counseling, right? To provide the right thing that the king should be doing. So he's continuing to do that with Dhritarashtra. But, Dhritarashtra, again, being so blinded and wants to be the king and wants his son to be the king, he doesn't really listen. And it gets to the point where Duryodhana really insults Vidura by saying really harsh things, and Vidura is just so detached that he's like, all right, like, it's not I don't have a role to play here, right? If my role is to basically be a minister and serve the king and tell them what's best to do, and if they're not really listening and it's going to go downhill from here, he's detached from that situation, and he's like, I would actually use this now to go on pilgrimage, right? So he basically leaves it, and he goes on to pilgrimage, and then we'll continue to hear a lot of his conversations with Maitreya, where he's asking these really spiritual questions, and he's getting all this spiritual knowledge from Maitreya, and then he meets Uddhava. And so he's on this pilgrimage, right? And he can continue to be on this pilgrimage, right? Or he decides to later on continue, but he comes back to the palace, right? And he comes back to the palace not for himself, right? He's already detached, he left. And it's not that he is there, kind of again, where Dhritarashtra is there because he's so attached to living in that lifestyle that he cannot live without it, right? And so Vidura, being his half-brother, seeing the situation he is in, comes back to the palace out of compassion right? To see like, hey, if Dhritarashtra leave his body like this is not going to really serve him. He's he's literally towards his last leg of this life, and he needs to turn this around and focus on his spiritual life. It's now or never kind of a situation for Dhritarashtra, right? So Vidura, out of his love and compassion, out of his pilgrimage, comes back to palace, right? And now he has tried this multiple times, right? Saying this nicely, you trying this in multiple ways, and nothing really worked, right? So, and now the situation has become so urgent that now he's not holding, any punches back, if you may, right? So that will happen a lot of times, right? Like in our relationships, as I don't know, like if you any one of you have like younger siblings, or in friendship, like you'll tell your friend or your partner or your sibling certain things, and you'll try to tell them when like they're probably doing something that's not going to help them, and you say it nicely, you say it in multiple ways, but then if like, all right, like this is not going to help them, and like this is the last resort, then you don't hold anything back. You say things that may seem harsh at the time, but it is for their benefit, right? So in this case, right, like we see Vidura like telling Dhritarashtra, like you're literally on your last leg, like you're so attached to living this lifestyle that you're literally living with people who killed your sons, right? And we hear the glory of Maharaj Yudhishthira, and this is probably the last thing that's on his mind, that hey, like why do I need to serve my uncle who actually took everything away from me, right? If anything, actually, we hear like Yudhishthira Maharaj is lamenting, like, hey, just because of me getting this kingdom, like so many people got killed, like this devastation happened. So that's not on his mind, right? But Vidura is trying to focus on that, to try to get to stretch, like just get out of here. Like this is not, you're living with people who killed your sons, right? And especially in this verse, he takes the name of Bhima, right? Again, to get that fire going, like get out of here. Because if you think of it technically, who's ruling the kingdom right now? It's Maharaj Yudhishthira. So if anything is being provided to anyone, it's because of his permission, or at the end of the day, it's whoever is at the top, right? So if it's Maharaj Yudhishthira at the top, he would say like, hey, you're actually living because of remnants or mercy of Maharaj Yudhishthira, and you should get out of here, right? But the reason he didn't do it is one, because Bhima and Duryodhana had that rivalry all the time, right? And Bhima is the one who killed Duryodhana and Dushashan, which were two of his favorite kids of Dhritarashtra's sons, right? Like two of his closest sons out of the 100, right? So he's reminding him, rather than saying Yudhishthira, he's saying like, hey, it's actually, you're living off Bhima's remnants here, to try to remind him like, hey, two of your favorite children were killed by this man, and you're living here, right? And then not only that, like it's like, hey, you're living like a household dog. That's really heavy. And telling that to a person who lived like a king, and putting him in, telling him that, it is really heavy, right? Like, hey, you're dying, you don't really much have left on your body, and why are you living like a household dog, right? But Vidura sees the urgency of the situation, so now he's not going to hold on to anything, and just try to use whatever he can to make it work. And he's doing that out of, again, his compassion and love, right? He can continue on his pilgrimage, and he has no need to be back in the palace. There's no reason, right? After this, he'll go back again on his pilgrimage. There's no reason for him to be back. So that's the love and the compassion of the Mahajans and the Mahatmas, that they keep on coming, back to this material world to help other souls to get out of here, right? And we are all blessed to be, somehow be in connection with Srila Prabhupada, who again, that super soul who comes to this material world to be able to, take us, who are acting like the Dhritarashtas and get us out of here. So two things I think, and I'll end with this. I think two things that I'll try to, as kind of a takeaway from this class, the lessons that we can learn is, one, anytime if there are certain things that are, quote unquote, not so positive in our situation, or that we weren't given by Krishna, we can always remember, like, I can take a Dhritarashtra path to this, or I can take a Vidura path to this, right? That can be just kind of a thing that we can always kind of meditate on and see what we choose, and see, how being obsessed with certain thing can lead to really a devastation. And then second, having gratitude towards these Mahatmas who are coming out of their compassion and their love to bring souls like ourselves closer to Krishna, and bringing, again, back to how the Prabhupada says it really beautifully, once going there, no one wants to come back to this material world of miseries, right? So we just imagine how responsible a task is entrusted to a sadhu like Mahatma Vidura. And then we can also, we cannot imitate Vidura, but we all can try to play a part, like that tiny little part of, being those tiny Viduras in, some parts, some days of our life, by sharing Krishna, by sharing that love and compassion with others. You don't even have to talk about Krishna, but just like by sharing love, by just hearing from others, that's goes a long way. By just by meeting someone with a smile, and that is right now in the world we live in, that goes a long way, because everyone has is suffering in one way or the other, right? And so if they just receive some love, some affection, someone to just hear them, that goes a long way, to where then you can kind of build that relationship to where they would be like, what is it that you're always so happy, or what is it that you are loving towards, what is that purpose that you're, and then you can kind of share about Krishna. But just being there for others, and try to be that tiny Viduras, if you may, or tiny ways that we can probably help Srila Prabhupada and these Mahatmas in their mission. And again, we'll have our own struggles and challenges, right? So it's not, we don't have to shy away from them, and it doesn't mean that we don't realize that, and it doesn't mean that we do not continue to work on that, and not be true to ourselves. So not be true to ourselves, but then we all have some capacity to be able to serve and give to others. So we try to continue to do that. Thank you so much. If you have any questions or comments, and if you could just say your name before, I see some new faces that I don't know. So if you could just introduce yourself by your name, that would be great.
Hare Krishna. I'm Radhika Preeti. We were talking about how Vidura spoke heavy words to Dhritarashtra, and when we care about somebody, that's the last thing we may resort to. I was thinking about a situation in my life where I have a friend who is really, really attached to a partner who may not be good for them, and not good for their spiritual life. And I guess a dilemma goes through my mind, okay, I can just give advice as a friend, but I have to be detached. It's their choice, and I have to be supportive. Or should I, be a little heavy? Because that's what you said, sometimes heaviness is compassion. When is it appropriate? Is that even something that we do as a friend, or is that up to the mentor?
Yeah. It's really hard, and I've been in a similar situation, right? Because you want the best for your friend, but they're just so tunnel vision at the point, or so blinded with the love that they're not seeing kind of the things. I think it really comes down to one thing is, if being heavy or saying the words will distance your friend from you, then that's not the right thing right now to do, because then you're distancing themselves. So then even when you're slowly planting that seeds, like, hey, like, look at this, like, this happened and this is not good for you in the long run, like, it's not going to help you, like, this is what your partner did right now, and this is how, so you're planting those seeds. They're not able to see that right now because they're just kind of blinded by the love that they feel that is in their relationship. But slowly, you can pray to Krishna that eventually they're able to see that, and those when that happens, those seeds or those things that you're planting will come to their mind and will help them, right? But if you choose to say something heavy, and you think they're not ready for it, to the point where they may see you as an enemy, because that can happen, and then at that point they will just distance themselves from you because of, like, hey, you're talking about my partner right now, and that's impacting our relationship. I don't want to hear it. And what they do is they just choose to distance themselves. Then that's going to be even worse, right? That's not going to help at all. So if you think that's what's going to happen, then you want to hold on to that and not use those heavy words, because then it's going to be worse, because then they're continuing on this path, and no one is there to talk to them or hear them. But when the things turn around, then they have you, right? And they're like, yes, you were right, and you can kind of help them through that, because again, there will be a lot of in situations like that, there's a lot of trauma, and things where when someone comes out of a not unhealthy relationship, then you need a friend or friends or a support system to be able to help you with that. So I think I would say, from again being in similar situation to you, is like, if you think they'll distance themselves if you kind of use those hearts, then just kind of be there, and we can pray to Krishna to help them to be able to see that. And if I have seen this in my life personally, if we, especially when we are sincerely praying for others, Krishna really reciprocates, because Krishna sees we really are trying to do that from from love of our heart, trying to help other souls, and Krishna really reciprocates really nicely.
I often find myself,
What's your name, Guru?
Dr. Jackson,
Jackson.
and you're Vallabha Kishor.
Lila Kishor.
I often find myself becoming attached, a little bit obsessed sometimes with assumptions, particularly in material conception, like thinking something is happening and like being like, oh yeah, that's what's going on. Yep. Just like really thinking of, like, having a certainty of these assumptions. Like if, like, let's say there's something happening, like a discomfort in the body, and I'll find myself like really thinking I'm certain about what's happening, or something is going on that seems uncomfortable emotionally, and it's like, this is it, boom, and it's like this heaviness. And so how would you recommend in the case of such to detach from that material conception and not hold so much certainty in the assumption?
Has it how is that impacted you though? Like, does it impact, like, kind of in a...
Well, so I often think, like, all right, here's what's happening, and here's what I think the answer or the way through should be, instead of like, I don't know what's happening and I don't know the answer. Krishna. There's this like conditioned response to think this is it and this is the answer. He's going for more of like a polarity instead of like a. And so it impacts in the sense of sometimes it could be correct. And you know, that answer could be right, but it doesn't matter because the attachment and the certainty is so energetically strong that it's constricting. And so sure, there could be a correctness to this approach, though it's so like it's so attached. That's what it impacts. Like it could be something beneficial spiritually to go about like, all right, I feel this way, and this could be a necessary approach, though just because of the attachment itself, it's like not beneficial.
Yeah.
You see that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think our brain is really cool in the way that a lot of times, like when we're getting certain information just to get like a quick response, it kind of does like these short circuits to get you to like the answer or the solution that you need. And you know, it may not always be accurate, but it just does it so fast. And like there's this whole thing you can go in detail of like the short circuits that happen in the brain. I think so the main impact of that, what you're saying is right, like you're being close-minded and you're feeling like I figured this out, right? And this is what it is. I already being consumed. I think the two things that you can kind of meditate on or think of is try to cultivate that humility and try to maybe write down the times that you were actually incorrect in those assumptions, right? Like, hey, actually, brain, last 10 times I did this, like these 4 times actually it was inaccurate, right? And so it looks like a 60% probability here. It's not really 100%. So just kind of like writing it down. So, you have your mind and you have your intelligence, right? So what we're doing by trying to write these down is trying to like, when that happened again, our intelligence to kick in and give it reasoning to be able to then fight with your mind. Like, hey, you're actually not right. Like, here are the facts. Like, you cannot deny these facts, right? And so you're writing those times down. So you could, do that kind of like from whatever your memory serves. And again, right now it may be hard because your brain would not help you to remind those situations, right? Because false ego and brain are so powerful. It's like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, you're always right. Like that never happens, right? And so just trying to like, anytime that happens, just kind of writing that down. And once you write that down, 2 things will happen. One is like that intelligence can kick in. 2, it helps us to cultivate like natural humility, right? Because you're like, I am actually not right all the time, and I do need help, and I do need to be able to talk to others. And then you can kind of talk to others about like who really understands you, and have that peer relationship. Be like, hey, this is what I think is going on. My assumptions are making me feel like this is what it should be in this situation. Do you think it's correct or not? Right? And now when you're asking that question, because your intelligence kicked in, you'll be a little bit more open. Again, the mind is hard that way. Like it will try to play the tricks like, well, I did ask and I already talked to someone too, but it can still be kind of closed. But slowly kind of, doing that over and over again will help. So it's not just going to happen the first time you do it or the second time you do it. So it's just kind of like, just like how you build like muscle memory, it'll be like that. Like you have to do it multiple times to kind of then it become like a second nature or behavior. So it'll take like a lot of repetition and trying to do it.
So I heard a response. In a different conversation with Sukavaha, she came and spoke. She said, question your mind, ask your mind questions. And this was very much in regards to the emotions. What am I feeling? What is the answer here, mind? What is the answer here, Krishna? So really creating this practice of questioning. And so I guess like this is on the same level, even if it's on this assumptions in regards to the body, assumptions in regards to the subtle body.
Yeah.
It's questioning.
Yeah. Anyone else?
A little bit more of a technical question. So, Vidura went on pilgrimage for 36 years, I heard.
Okay.
And so, how long was the Battle of Kurukshetra?
It was, I don't know, that's a good question. I thought it was days, but
18
days,
days,
right? Yeah.
With the 36-year buildup?
Well, there was a lot of time, I think, before and after the battle too, that he was gone.
Okay.
So.
And with the sons, Drona and or the two sons of
Duryodhana?
Duryodhana and other one. Do they go back to Godhead? Like, how should we feel about that? If they're analytical towards the Pandavas and Krishna and have like this envy, but they're still playing a crucial role in the pastime, like what's the response?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know in this specific situation, but you know, we like what's like where Duryodhana and Dushashan goes after, you know, this lifetime. I'm sure like we can find that in scriptures in detail, but I don't know the answer specific to that. But a lot of times when thought like this come to my mind, it's like, you know, two things. One is we see demons that, you know, Krishna is killing. Just because Krishna is killing them, they're going, you know, back to God. And actually, Krishna tells Arjuna, right, like whoever is dying in this battlefield of Kurukshetra, like is already taken care of, right? Now, Dushashan does die on the battlefield. Again, Duryodhana technically, you know, he escapes and, you know, did not technically, I think, did not die on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So you can kind of read about. But again, I mean, I think the way I look at it's like when questions like this usually come to my mind, it's like it's hard for me to wrap my tiny brain around Krishna's compassion and mercy, and so it can be shown to anyone, including, you know, a fallen soul like me. So it actually gives me, you know, hope and positivity. It's like, yep, you know, if like Dushashan and Duryodhana can go back, like I have a chance too, right? So I just gotta do my part. So just kind of use it in that sense. But yeah, I don't know like exactly what happened, but that's kind of what, like, whenever a question like that come in my mind, like that's kind of like what I meditate on. Yeah. Okay. If you want to take breakfast and if you have any questions, I'm happy to have the conversation or any comments through the breakfast too. We can do that. Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Govinde Namo Brahmani Vaishnave Svapunyam Rajan Vishwasodaya Jayate.
Which the persons of our faith and love for Sada, the spiritual deliverance of the Lord, for the deity of Sri Govinda, supreme personality of Godhead, the transcendental Krishna.